Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit more about the Virgin Islands. And there's a hearing today in front of a judge where the lawyer for some of the survivors is going to be meeting with the judge as well as the executors of the estate. And they're going to try and hammer out who gets what, where things are going, money-wise, etc., etc. So as we all know that the Virgin Islands has inserted themselves into this case as well. And we all know that the Virgin Islands is also trying to get involved in the divvying up of the dough. But I don't think that we can trust them any more than we can trust Indike or Khan at this point, right? We understand what's going on. The Virgin Islands wants that money. They want to get their piece of the pie. There's a lot of money we're talking about here, and in fact, it's even more than we were first led to believe, because there's other things that have been sold off, etc., etc. So the portfolio has grown in size, and that's what our article is going to talk about today. And this article is going to talk about some of the different assets that were sold off by the estate, some of the different things that are still being looked at to see what they're worth, etc., etc. So with that hearing going on today down in the Virgin Islands, this is definitely a nice little lead into that, and it'll give us a little bit of an idea of some of the new assets that have been added to the portfolio, or should I say assets that have been taken away from the portfolio and replaced by actual dollars. So, the article is from the Tribune News Service, and it's a McClatchy, Washington outlet, I guess. The headline is Jeffrey Epstein Estate Sale. Executors unload $195,000 Bentley, Mercedes, and other assets, which is good, right? Unload all this guy's assets, unload everything, make sure that the money goes into a trust for the survivors, and then let's start divvying out the dough after we start bringing people to justice. Pretty good plan, in my opinion. Washington. Executors winding down the estate of disgraced financier, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein have raised more than $1 million through the sales of his assets and account liquidations. Oh, I'm sure the Virgin Islands, they're doing backflips over that. An extra $1 million? I could see their mouth watering as we speak. In a delayed court filing that had been extended until last Friday, lawyers for Epstein's estate showed that his net worth has increased by about $80 million since his death and listed some of his pricey assets they've sold off. Imagine that, $80 million since his death, since August. That's crazy. That's a very large increase in wealth. $80 million. If he was only worth $566 million coming into it, I mean, that's a significant amount of money. So, again, there is a lot of money here, and we know when there's a lot of money that a lot of shady sons of bitches come out of the woodwork. So, I just hope that this all goes correctly. And I hope that the people who deserve to get this money get this money. I don't want, like I've said a million times, I don't want to see this money going to any state, any county, anything like that. This needs to go to the victims, the people who actually suffered at the hands of these people. That's who needs to get this money. These include several luxury cars, including a 2018 Bentley sold for $195,000 and a 2019 Mercedes-Benz for $133,000. They did not disclose the purchasers. Okay, who cares about that? I don't care who purchased them. As long as they're getting rid of all of this stuff that they're never going to need. Why does a dead man need cars? Sell everything. Some sort of an estate sale, whatever it may be. But sell off all of this stuff and put all of that money into a trust. In all, the executors said slightly more than $1 million has been raised from asset sales and liquidating 4 accounts tied to shell companies. Again, with the shell companies. And you're telling me he doesn't have money hidden elsewhere? I really hope that there's a forensic accountant on the case. I really hope that the survivors have, their lawyers have a forensic accountant digging into this. Because there is no way that Epstein doesn't have money hidden offshore, parked in other accounts. He had all of these shell companies. He was playing serious financial games. And we all know that he was involved in a pyramid scheme with Steve Hoffenberg back in the day as well. This guy just stinks of misappropriation of funds, folks. All right, this is a guy that I would never ever trust a guy like Jeffrey Epstein with my money. All right, not $10, never mind billions the way Wexner did. Jeffrey Epstein just screams scumbag. The detailed account of Epstein's estate also showed that his principal banking for his day-to-day operations was done through two banks in nearby Puerto Rico, Banco Popular and First Bank, and One First Bank. Well, we all know what's happening over in Puerto Rico as we speak. It's very corrupt in Puerto Rico. You had people holding on to supplies after the hurricane and not distributing them to the public, and you've seen warehouses full of things that they weren't giving to the people who needed them, etc., etc. You have politicians getting in trouble, their offices being raided down there. So I'm sure Jeffrey Epstein had the link and the in with those banks, and I think those banks should probably face a lot of scrutiny to see what was what. Because we all know he was laundering money as well. Was he laundering money at those banks? I'm not sure. But it's something that needs to be looked into, in my opinion. Epstein's net worth at the time of his reported death by hanging last August, allegedly, was estimated at $550 million. In their first quarterly filing, executors of his estate now estimate the value of his total assets as of last Friday at about $634.8 million. Boy, that's quite the increase, huh? Quite the increase in assets, especially for a dead man. And you know what's so funny to me, folks? And I shouldn't even say funny, but it's so mind-boggling to me, I guess is a better word. How are all of these properties still in operation? There's still employees there, etc., etc. These people are siphoning money off from the survivors. There should be no people working there. Close them down. Nobody on these properties. They should all be evidence at this point. But yet, there's still people running around at these places, maintaining them, etc., etc. Executors also revised upward the value of his assets at time of death to more than $628 million. They said his cash on hand at the time of death was about $9.4 million, and that following expenditures since then is now at about $7.6 million. So there you go. Almost $2 million in expenditures have already been siphoned off of this guy's loot. You don't think that the survivors could use that $2 million? Oh, therapy isn't cheap, right? Fixing your life is not cheap, and that's exactly what they've been forced to do after Jeffrey Epstein's disgusting rampage. So why are we siphoning off $1.8 million for expenditures, for people to cut the grass, etc., etc.? Cease and desist all of that right this second. The revelations in court documents were made public Monday amid this week's expected probate hearing in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where the Attorney General has put a lien on the Epstein estate in a bid to seize the two islands there he owned. And you've heard her come out and say, well, it's to make sure the victims get their piece, and I do not believe that one bit. I've talked about Denise George several times here on the podcast now, and the more I read about her, I do not get any more comfortable thinking that she's going to do the right thing if she gets her hands on these islands. Lawyers for victims will go before a judge as well as executors of the estate to fight it out Tuesday over where certain claims will be settled and by whom. See, again, this Denise George lady she's really trying to sink her fangs into this one, boys and girls. She's really, really, really trying to make sure that the Virgin Islands gets paid on both ends of this deal. Attorney General Denise George, a relative newcomer, recently filed a motion to intervene to give the local government a say in matters of estate settlement on the grounds that some of Epstein's underage victims were abused locally. That's the premise, but we all understand what's going on. We all understand that if they really cared, they would have been around while he was in the midst of abusing these people. But instead, nobody was there. Everybody looked the other way because they were getting their beaks wet. Everybody looked the other way because they were getting some fazul slipped in their pocket. Well, now on the back end, after Epstein's gone, to save face as well as to get more money, they want control over the disbursement of the loot from Epstein's Islands and the Virgin Island holdings. Yeah, that doesn't sit well with me, and it's not sitting well with a lot of people, according to the emails I've received. In an indictment last month, she alleged that Epstein continued to bring underage women to his properties as recently as 2018, at least as young as 12. Well, why didn't you arrest him when he showed up there with 12-year-olds? You knew he was a sex offender. Your officers knew, everybody knew what he was, who he was, and you're letting him run around with these 12-year-old girls? And furthermore, who were these 12-year-old girls? Where are they now? What happened to them? Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges last July, 8 months after the Miami Herald published Perversion of Justice, a series of stories examining the extraordinary plea deal 10 years earlier that absolved him of trafficking allegations. The quarterly filings by the executors listed 3 pages of potential ongoing litigation, underscoring how complex it will be to settle Epstein's estate. Yeah, well, good. Guess what? It's just because it's going to be complex doesn't mean anything to me. I don't really care. All right, you people need to figure out how this money needs to be dispersed, and it needs to be dispersed to the survivors of these crimes. The executors, longtime Epstein attorneys Darren K. Indyke and Richard D. Kahn, whom the Virgin Islands alleges in the motion to intervene were complicit, have proposed a New York-based victims' compensation fund to which the island's government has filed a motion in opposition. Look, here's the thing what I feel about with the compensation fund. I think that the compensation fund is an okay route if some of the survivors want to go that way, but I also think that it has to be the sort of compensation fund where they're still allowed to tell their story. It can't be an end to them telling their story, right? Because that's exactly what they try and do. That's what these rich people all try and do. But that's not what Denise George is worried about. She's not worried about any of that. She wants this money for the Virgin Islands, in my opinion. The new report from executors listed a number of payments to utilities, banks, and some small creditors. They also offered that there are $160,000 in outstanding checks for maintenance and upkeep at his properties in New Mexico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and more than $114,000 owed to Bell Miami Incorporated for helicopter repairs. So look at that. Outstanding checks for maintenance and upkeep at his properties? Why are those properties still functioning? Why do they need maintenance and upkeep of that amount of money? All right, hire a couple of guys to come over and sweep every couple of days or something and call it a day, folks. Enough with siphoning this loot off. What I mean, really? The estate paid $86,372 in cemetery and funeral home expenses for Epstein and $618,144 in pre-death credit card expenses and contributions to his foundation in the Virgin Islands that did business as Enhanced Education. And again, the Virgin Islands sure reaped the rewards when Epstein was donating computers and all that stuff. They didn't turn any of that down. But now all of a sudden that they see all this money's on the line and they think that they might be able to get a piece, well, they're in. But, instead of one toe in the water, they dove in head first. So we're going to keep an eye on this, and we're going to see what happens in that hearing today. And when we get a report on what that hearing consisted of and what happened inside of that hearing, I will definitely bring it to you. All right, everybody, enjoy your Tuesday. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. I have a ton of emails to get to, so if I have not responded to your email yet, I am sorry. There's just a lot of them. A whole lot of them that I have to get through. So I'll start answering those emails today and replying to as many as I possibly can. And of course, tonight I will be back with the daily drop, and I will have some nice information to share with you about the upcoming Santa Fe trip. Oh yes, folks, what, you thought it wasn't going to occur? Certain things had to line up. I had a source that was out of town, went out of town again, and now they're going to be back in town. So to make my trip coincide with them, I had to wait for them to give me the green light. So we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight on the Daily Drop. And we'll get right to it. All right, everybody, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you all later on.